YouTube. Yeah, so I'm doing a wee comparison here because these two amps are quite similar. Marshall Laney 30 watts, same size of speaker. I think it's a 10-inch speaker, possibly an 8-inch. Let's just finalize that fully. It's a 8-inch speaker. It seems quite big, to be honest. But a decent size. I think I've said this before. This is actually what I'd recommended to the Marshall's actually one I recommended to someone, a kid I used to teach guitar 2 years ago, because it just sounds better once you get up to a certain speaker size. I know modern amps, you get the ones with like the Blackstar ID Core, where they're two tiny stereo speakers, and they use Voodoo to make it sound bigger. But just having a nice size speaker that pumps plenty of air is a good thing. And at this size, you're at the level of it can definitely go too loud for in the house. But its operating range is kind of where I would play it at. It's where it works that much better. Whereas if you've got a much bigger amp, it's kind of hardly on. Like basically the amps I normally use, they're sitting there trying to get them to go less than 1, so they're not too loud. On the flip side as well, they are also big enough to play along with a drummer, unless they're an absolute thumper. But for a rehearsal studio or something like that, you're totally right on the bottom edge of what you can do, but you can, and they sound pretty good. I remember playing one time with it wasn't that exact Marshall, it was the MG, which is a slightly newer version of it, in the studio, playing with 2 guitars, bass and drums, and it was up full bung, but it sounded really good, and it was loud enough. It was loud enough to play lead over all that. So it's a really nice size, giggable these days, definitely, and relatively inexpensive and relatively easy to carry as well, because valve amps are heavy. Both of them put together don't weigh as much as a Sovtech. That's just a head. That one you don't need anything else. So just a very quick demo of this I'm hoping for. The last video I did didn't have the sound wasn't working properly. It wasn't loud enough. Now, yeah, I'm not quite hitting the red, but at least you could probably hear me. Now I've got an issue with I've got a pedal there which switches between the 2 amps, and the problem with it is when you've got both the amps on and you stop. I've got both the amps on, and I'm playing through the Laney, the Marshall just buzzes, and vice versa, because the pedal I've got's not the right thing. I made it, and it's like I had to look at it there, and the switch is just too cheap. It doesn't have any extra lugs on it, so I will be switching them on and off. Which I could probably actually just have the 2 of them on and just actually swap the lead over, but no, got a pedal. Doing it this way. So the Marshall has they're both foot switchable. They both got a button to change between the drive and the clean channel. The clean channel has a volume, bass and treble, whereas the Laney just has a volume. It's got like a master 3-band EQ which does both channels, whereas the Marshall has a bass and treble on the clean channel and then a 3-band EQ on the distortion channel. So maybe better if you're going to be using that foot switch an awful lot. I don't know. I suppose technically you get more range with the clean volume on this one because you've got a 3-band EQ on it, whereas that one's only got a 2-band EQ. But in saying that's got a 2-band EQ for the clean and another one for the distortion channel. I've just got all the knobs at pretty much 12 o'clock. In fact, actually, you might even be able to see it. I've got them a wee bit. I kind of tried to make them sound a little bit more similar. Yeah, so both of them distortion channel, gain and a volume and a 3-band EQ. This one's gain and volume and then an overall 3-band EQ. Both got reverb. One in this one works, one in this one doesn't work, so I won't be using reverb. But normally these would work. This one is just broken. Had a look at it, don't know what's going on. It just doesn't work. Yeah, so which one am I plugged into? The Laney. I think the Laneys are maybe quite a few years newer, actually. I think the Marshall might be, I don't know, what we're talking, early 90s, and that's maybe late 90s, something like that. And I'm using the I'm in his Roadster because it's HSS, so I'm going to, if I use position 4, we get a nice stratty. In fact, I've got a pedal plugged in. I'll put some reverb on. And no other pedals in. I'm going through a loop pedal and through 3 or 4 pedals that aren't turned on, but they're not in the circuit. Laney. Marshall. Both of them, thumbs up, clean sound. As I was saying there, if you're wanting to play loud, no, you're not. It's probably clean. I think if you're playing along with a drummer, you're probably not going to be able to get the clean sound up, unless they're a brush drummer, you know. But if they're thumping away, you're not going to be able to play clean with these up at full bung, or they might be loud enough, but they probably won't be particularly super clean as they are now. So, we're going to play the Marshall, so Marshall distortion, so, and humbucker. And no reverb. Actually put it on the humbucker. There's a reason I played those particular 2 songs. So we're now on the Laney on crunch without that max button turned on. Gonna hit the max button. Doom. main was to try and make. We're trying to do some slightly shorter videos so I get a bit. I can try and beat that YouTube algorithm and actually get it put up so people are more likely to watch to the end. But ultimately, both of them awesome amps, which I'm actually just going to put up for sale because they're no use to me. I've got too many amps. Don't need no more. But if it came down to it, one of them would do me. It's the only amp I really need. To be honest, I'm not in the band playing guitar anymore, so I don't even need a gigging guitar amp really. But if it came down to be honest, even the way I was playing, if I'm playing a gig every 3 months or something, a few gigs a year, that's fine. It's totally fine. Either of them. And the whole idea of just taking your own amps so you know what you're dealing with. I'm not a pedal guy, so I would just run them the way they are. Probably take the rat pedal and run it into the clean channel, and then wherever I'm playing, just get them to mic it up, and then just use that. It'd be fine. Obviously, more modern amps you would get, like your Sparks and all that, but all the modelling things and stuff like that in it are for some people. They're not for me. Being a purist, there's a certain romance about turning up with an amp and a guitar, and you plug the guitar into the amp and whoa, rock. That's it. Without having to faff about too much. I'm not really one for. I mean, obviously I'm not touching any of the dials in these things. The Marshall, the gain's only at 4 or something like that, so it goes much heavier. And same with the Laney. Well, the gain's actually like about 7 on the Laney, and they're both kind of sounding similar, but it's got that max button. They both, I think, just comfortably say they both go to slightly more distorted than you would probably than is useful. Like once you get everything up at max, it becomes that sort of turns down a wee bit so you can still hear some notes. Both of them will do that. Obviously, I know that when you're starting out. But so both these amps sit under my recommended for not even really beginners. It's just don't be going thinking you need to spend 700 quid on getting an amp for you're playing in the house. It's not going to make any difference, really. I mean, if you're spending, the way I look at it, or the way I still look at it, if you're spending time fiddling with presets and adjusting all that stuff, not that there's anything wrong with that. Some people do that. It's not my thing. I would rather be working out how to play the guitar. I remember going into, when I was trying out for bands years ago, and these folk would have these big Korg pedal boards and stuff, and basically couldn't play the guitar, but I think they spent more time fiddling with the pedal than they did, at home the night before rather than actually learning what the song was going to be. Whereas give a really good guitarist. I said me, and then mentioned really good guitarist. I didn't mean it that way. I mean, it's totally enough for anyone who's good on the guitar can make the sounds out of these amps. I'm quite happy just to set the sound, get the sound I like, and to be honest, it took me no time to get those sounds, and the sounds I've got there are both on. Basically, I'll put the volume so they're both at the same volume, and they're not overloading the mic or anything like that. That's what I set it up to. It was all it needed. So I don't even know. I mean, I suspect which one. I don't know. There's advantages and disadvantages of both, but not much of either really. Marshall, there was a time when Marshall was like, was the thing. Like when I was learning, probably isn't like that anymore because of the internet and stuff like that. You can look stuff up, but when I was starting here 25 years ago, whatever it was, Marshall amp, whoa, Marshall. I was, you see a wall behind Angus Young and Judas Priest, and it's like, well, it's got to be a Marshall. And then you get Laney, which is favourite band's Black Sabbath. Famously, Tony Iommi uses Laney amps, or did up until the 80s. When I started playing the guitar, he wasn't using Laney, but he did for all the I'm not going to say the good albums, the first however many up to the 80s, Laney, and then more recently when he did the reunion stuff, back to Laney, but in the middle he was slutting about using not Mesa Boogie, what's the one, Engel. He used Engel amps, which are not cheap. But both these amps, both awesome, both for sale. If I was to advise you which one to buy, I just try them both and see which one you think sounds better. If you noticed, I was playing kind of AC/DC a little bit on both of them, and Sabbath on both of them. Being Marshall, well, AC/DC Marshall, obviously, and Black Sabbath Laney, yeah. And maybe the Marshall sounds a little bit more like AC/DC, and the Laney sounds a bit more like Sabbath, maybe, but is that in your head? Neither of them sounded... I'm not sure you could really tell the difference between the two of them. I've got the two of them sitting next to each other, plugging into the same amp, same guitar, and at the same time and switching A, B in them. I'm not sure if you had that at your house, one of them at your house and one of them here, and you come up and played one up here, and then drove 10 minutes to get home and then tried the other one. I'm not sure you could tell the difference between the two. It's only because I've got the two of them right next to each other, and even then, not a huge difference. Both excellent, but I'd just comment that the reverb on the Laney is broken. The reverb on the Marshall it's not particularly powerful as reverb goes. It's a much more sensible one. They both get spring reverbs in them. Well, a broken spring reverb and a working spring reverb. But it's like, see, normally when you get something with reverb as an option, like between 1 and 2 on the dial, that's where your reverb sounds are. Then once you get past that, it's for psychedelic freakout. You know, it's so reverby that, I'm not saying you can't use it, but you can't use it for normal playing. You have to be using the reverb. Whereas the Marshall doesn't go to silly levels of reverb, like kind of up at half and stuff like that. I can still handle it, which is quite rare. You know, normally something like the only other amp I've got with reverb on is this one. You know, if you put that reverb up at 10, it's just it's unusable, whereas the Marshall one is usable. Yes, so brilliant. I mean, as an amp, brilliant. For what I use the amp for, either of them would be totally fine. Especially, see if you're looking like what's the buzzword? Pedal platform. Totally. If you're running a pedal board into it or something like that, it's got they've both got a good EQ on them. They're both big enough to actually move air, so they sound okay, and the clean channels are both fine, so that you can run your whatever effectsy things you kids are using into it. No bother. And even then, when it comes down to you can get the more modern versions of probably both of these amps will have rudimentary effects built in. But see, to be honest, you can get like a Zoom or a Korg pedal that's maybe 10 years old, and because the technology moves on with them, they're really cheap to get one that's 10 years old, which is going but the amp's got chorus on it, yeah, but it's got a very basic chorus. Normally you've got like a volume for it, whereas if you've got like one of these, the wee, is it Zoom or Korg make them kind of things, or probably all the companies make them, you'll have a much more variable chorus that will have, depth and rates and all that stuff on it, rather than just being, And it would have reverb in it, so you wouldn't need it from the amp. But that's your idea. There's your gigging thing. You've got your floorboard pedal thing at the gig. You give a DI of that into the desk, or you put it through the amp first into the DI and use the amp on stage. So you've actually got an amp that you can hear that's physically there, pushing air, and has the feel and the sound that you need. The whole thing about playing without an amp at all, when you're just relying on the monitors and stuff, it's not quite the same as, you're on stage, you want to be standing in front of a Marshall. And good enough for a rehearsal room, I would think, unless you've got John Bonham in the drums. But even then, even if you're in the rehearsal room, taking a wee mic up, stick it through the PA, no problem. Plus, it's relatively easy to fix. You don't have to change the valves. That's something that in my tube amps are the thing. Tubes are damn expensive and they wear out. It's like tires in a car. You can't just keep the same ones on it all the time. You have to change them out, and the bigger the amp is, the more tubes, and they get more expensive. Plus, the things about tubes as well is you can totally be killed going into it and trying to fix it, because there's mega lethal voltages in there, like thousands of volts and stuff, because of the anodes. You can tell I'm not technically that proficient in tubes, but if you don't understand the circuit, don't go messing about. Whereas one of these, as provided it's not plugged into the mains, you'll be all right. Even if you did go in and lick your finger and poke everything when it's not plugged in, you might get a wee shock, but not a lethal one. Whereas in a valve amp, yes, you will. It will kill you, and you'll get flung out of that window by a wee Fender Champ. That was trying. My pal wanted me to mod for him, and then I got a double shock. I got the shock, which was, it probably wasn't that big a shock, but my God, was I shocked. Not electrically, physically by it. I shat it. I nearly got flung out the window, so I will not even go into tube amps anymore. And also the repair bills on them is not going to be anything like, you know, to be honest, really, you're talking about under 100 quid for one of these, so if it's going to cost you, you know, 100 quid to get it fixed, just buy another one. Buy the other one. Don't buy. I had the Marshall last time. Buy the Laney next time. Laney's got a metal grill on it as well, which I suppose counts for something. And I would maybe say that if you were more, I think the Laney's got a bit more brutal, a bit more nu metal, proper heavy metal thrashy sound than what the Marshall does. The Marshall's maybe a bit more AC/DC Judas Priesty, whereas the Laney has, with that the Max hardcore badge on it, is maybe a bit more able to do, you know. But try to think of modern metal bands. I don't know any, even though I go to download every year and I see them. But, you know, like pure brutal. It's maybe a bit more brutal if that's your thing. You know what I mean? If you've got like a Mohican and bits of metal all through your face and tattoos all the way around your neck and all that, you probably would be more into the Laney. Talk about stereotyping people. Yeah. Rock on. Catch you later. Both these are for sale. They might be sold. I'm going to put them up this afternoon. I don't know when this video is going to go out. They're just handy things to have lying about, but I don't need to have as many. I've got too many amps. I'm going to try and get myself down to 1 amp, 2 amps. I'm going to keep the Sovtech because I bought that on my 18th birthday, and it's a very expensive one, money in the bank sort of thing. And I'm going to keep. I think I'll keep my wee Laney. It's actually about the same size as that VC15, and I think that's it. I've got the gig and amp thing is not. Why have I got gig and amps when I don't gig? Because they look cool. Rock on.